Yes, there's another Howard, and he kindly sent me a Spectrum 48K with the rubber keyboard. Hello folks, and welcome back to dubious engineering. We're repairing a ZX Spectrum. We're still working on it. Here's a quick recap on where we got with the ZX Spectrum repair in the last episode. Let's plug this ZX Spectrum into the Diamante monitor. Let's get this cable sorted out. A little bit of heat shrink. We have successfully reversed the polarity of the switching power supply. Here we go. Oh, happy days. But sadly, nothing. And these ribbon cables don't appear to be in the greatest of shape. All we should have to do is just carefully poke this through there and there. Now we've got two decent ribbon cables that will link up to our PCB. Having dug through my capacitor collection, I've now finally found all the appropriate components. A few of these have been replaced before. So the next part of the mission then is to buy sockets for all of the RAM chips on this board and sockets for all of the RAM chips on this board so that we can start interchanging chips and figuring out which RAM chip it is on here that's died. The next part of the mission is to try and diagnose what the fault was. So I took it upon myself to go ahead and buy a second ZX Spectrum from eBay used, and this one works, which is great news because it means that we've got chips that function. It means that we've got signals that we can look at and compare, and we can effectively try and diagnose what the problem is there. The good news is we do have a lot of chips that are socketed, so we could potentially unsolder a shed load of chips and resolder a shed load of chips. So I bought myself a whole bunch of these little DuB dual inline sockets. Having done all of that, I found out about something really rather cool. So somebody that has done some rather spectacular videos already of how to restore these devices is this gentleman right here, Dave from the Retro Workshop. Please do pop over to his channel and check it out. Dave very kindly sent me this little tool here, and what this does is it plugs into the back of the ZX Spectrum and it has a diagnostic function, and it actually looks at all of the chips on the Spectrum and tells you which chips are likely to be faulty. So let's go ahead and plug this device in, let's have a look at our Spectrum, and let's see if we can figure out what the next step is. So first of all, why don't we go ahead and plug this device into a working Spectrum, see what it shows us on a working Spectrum. So the board goes through a setup sequence, and as we can see here, it's showing us that the lower 16K of RAM has been tested and it's okay, and it's now testing the upper 32K of RAM. Good news, a message just popped up telling us that all RAM is good, both lower and upper RAM. And then there's a selection of other tests that you can go ahead and run. So all in all, very useful tool. Right, let's try this in our non-working Spectrum and see what it reports. Straight away you can see that there's some kind of fault. All the characters don't look quite like they should, and it's saying that it cannot proceed because both upper and lower RAM is bad. We're just not having a good day with this Spectrum. So the first thing we're going to have to do is replace these two chips. I think that says IC12 and IC17. So looking at the PCB, this is IC12 right here. That's the 4116. And then an IC17 is this guy here. The good news, we have some spare chips on a working board. So my plan now is to remove one each, well, certainly remove one of these chips, and I can pull one of these chips from a socket And then what we can do is fit some sockets on this board here and establish if we can get a little bit further with that test. So it's time to make use of the very kindly donated Taz Fade Dodge solder sucker. Taz very kindly gave this to me when he came to visit us on a tour. Anyway, I'm just going to do is just get a little bit of solder on these chip pins and use this automated solder sucker to go ahead and remove the solder from around these pin legs. And I do apologise, guys, if I've been a little bit slow on making videos recently. I've had some issues. We all have issues, I know, but I've had some issues with family. Mum's dementia hasn't been being kind to us recently, so hence a little bit slow with video output. But the good news is things are back on track. Now, let's have a look. Let's see. I think this is mostly unsoldered. This is all looking pretty promising. Right, let's get these chips out. So one suspect chip removed later. And guess what? Bing bong! There was a knock at the door. And the postie showed up with this. Can you believe it? It's a brand spanking new issue 3 ZX Spectrum PCB with all the silk screening, a nice modern version of it, lovely silvery connectors, just itching to be populated. And I've got to be honest, looking at this PCB, looking at all the bodging, all the modding that's had to happen to this early PCB to get it up to speed, I think we're going to go to part 3 of the ZX Spectrum build, which is going to be quite literally making a brand new Spectrum out of some old components. Clearly, I'm going to have to buy a couple of memory chips. Let's get all of these components transferred onto this PCB, order up all the bits and pieces that we need, and let's make ourselves an almost brand new ZX Spectrum, which will last for another 40 years. The Lost Retro Tapes on Twitter very kindly sent me this PCB that he had spare. I've started work on it. I've made a commitment. I'm definitely going to get rid of this old PCB with its thin tracks and its non-varnished top layer, and we're definitely going to convert over to this guy here. And then, of course, a big thank you to Retro Workshop for sending me this Retrolium Smart Card diagnostic tool, without which I think it would be almost impossible to find out which upper RAM or which lower RAM were faulty. Right, time to order some components, time to start building a Spectrum so that we've got a beautiful, perfect Spectrum to play around with going forwards. Thanks ever so much for watching, guys and girls. We'll see you in the next video. Don't forget, give us a good old thumbs up, make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye for now. Which chips are likely to be needing to be which chips are likely to be faulty.